Gives me great pleasure to bring on board now none other than Amitabh Kant of Niti Aayog. Mr. Kant, good afternoon. Thank you for joining us. Now, Mr. Kant, the Prime Minister has shared his vision on Atmanirbhar Bharat, make India more self-reliant. What kind of policy framework do you think now needs to be put into place to make India more self-reliant and make India more Atmanirbhar?
I think it's very clear under the Atmanirbhar Bharat vision set by the Prime Minister that the domestic sector will have to be made more competitive. We will build scale and size and target specific areas of global value chains and enhance our contribution to global trade. It was not about isolation, as some have said. It's not about anti-globalization. It's about actually penetrating global markets and using the strength of our domestic markets to do this. And to achieve this, we have a three-pronged strategy. One, invite investments, both FDI and domestic, into sectors of strength. Secondly, build scale to ensure economies of scale in the areas of strength. And I think thirdly, really kindle the animal spirits of entrepreneurs in India. This is, to my mind, critical, that we really push for this. We've already initiated several policy measures. We brought in the production-linked incentives in mobile and in electronic, in APIs and pharma, in medical devices. And we will continue to push for radical reform so that India becomes easy and simple, and we continue to push for growth.
Mr. Kant, I'm not drawing you to political waters, but Made in India was also a campaign which was, in a sense, unveiled by the current administration a couple of years ago. And some would argue that that never really saw the success with which it was really launched and it was ideated. So how is Atmanirbhar really different from Made in India?
People don't realize that, because of Make in India, we could focus on ease of doing business. We jumped up 79 position on the ease of doing business ranking. We could open almost all sectors of India's economy through FDI, and actually our FDI has consistently grown over the last 5 years. This year we are receiving close to about $80 billion through foreign direct investment. Just imagine if this had not happened. And FDI has brought along with it a lot of technology, etc. Thirdly, I think it's because of Make in India thrust, we could focus on a new patent policy. We could really reduce the massive pendency on patent rights, and patents were pending for a very long time. Trademarks were pending. We could focus on all that. Now, important thing is that, in India, we don't produce to size and scale. And we've made, while we've subsidized agriculture, while we kept tax out from the services sector for a very long while, we have tended to penalize manufacturing sector simply by land being at very high cost, by labor laws which have tended to protect small size, and by ensuring that electricity costs are almost 2.5 times that of other destinations. You want to make manufacturing efficient in India, you've got to take care of these aspects. Without that, it will not happen. And I think the focus this time is to really make manufacturing efficient and to make it globally competitive, to enhance, and there are several reforms which have been taken in this direction.
Mr. Kant, I saw a tweet yesterday that you are in support for India's ban on Chinese apps. Why is that? Some would argue that isn't this against completely deglobalization?
Well, my view always has been that India is to be a data sovereign country. Any app released here has to respect data sovereignty. Secondly, my belief is that many of these apps are actually lifestyle apps. They are not utility apps. And they should adhere to India's data integrity, privacy, transparency, and sovereignty. They must be transparent as far as the origin and final destination of data is concerned. This is critical to my mind. Secondly, China has, as you are fully aware, has grown and evolved and developed as far as the tech world is concerned by actually totally closing the rest of the world. Google, Twitter, none of them can operate in China. And you have to provide a equal field to everyone. So you allow your products to develop, don't allow other products to come in and create an imbalance, and then you allow them to penetrate Indian markets. We've been very open about this because we believe in a free market economy, but I think there was a challenge about the transparency of origin and final destination of data, and I think that is critical.
Mr. Kant, some would argue that in India, you've had two large success stories. One is pharma and second is auto. Now, they both are big industries. One is based on chemistry, other is based on supply chain. So what auto and pharma has, let's say, managed to achieve, why do you think other industries, other entrepreneurs are not able to achieve that?
My personal view is that India has a comparative and a competitive advantage in nearly 15 sectors, around 14 to 15 sectors with the rest of the world. And we have a comparative advantage, to my mind, on quite a few areas. Chemicals, pharmaceuticals, leather, textile, food products. We enjoy substantial comparative advantage in terms of services trade with the rest of the world. But we have to make ourselves very, very competitive as far as land, labor, electricity is concerned. Now, one of the challenges that quite often we get into the sunset areas of industry, where it's very difficult to penetrate because other countries have already got in. We need to get into sunrise areas and bring size and scale. Secondly, it's very important that we focus. We are too democratic, and therefore we start supporting all the sectors under the sun, and we start supporting every single exporter or producer. Look at the MEI scheme and the way it was expanded. So we spend 50,000 crores, but we support even small exporters. Whereas if you look at the strategy followed in South Korea, they created global champions, Samsung, Hyundai, global champions. We support to become a global champion, and then they do backward integration with the small MSME sector. And I think our strategy should be that we identify about 14, 15 sectors. We identify global champions and we really support them to the hilt and make them really big players. And along with that, you'll see MSME sector going. And therefore, my personal view is that India must create big time global champions in several sectors. And that is one approach we've taken through this production linked incentive scheme. And I think we need to do the same thing with automobile. We need to do that in textile. We need to do that in food processing. Few areas, but become a global champion.
Fair point. But Mr. Kant, given that in order to be competitive, you have to automate more. If one of the underlying theme of Atmanirbhar Bharat is to also create job creation, do you think somewhere that will get defeated? Because when you speak about size, scale, even skill, all these features and aspects, they require a lot of automation. And the minute you start automating, you will become efficient, but you will not create jobs.
So, India already has a very strong manufacturing base in high value segments that are already quite highly automated. You look at automobiles, you look at mobile manufacturing, even though these segments are highly automated in aggregate terms, they also create huge employment opportunities by providing jobs to very highly skilled workers. And India has a plethora of high skilled engineers and workers who are already pretty adept, with working in an automated, very automated settings. And my view is that automation will only be a boon and not a curse. It will actually help us to move forward, and Indians are quite skilled as far as this is concerned.
Okay, we spoke about large sectors, but what about bottom of the pyramid sectors, the real nuts and the bolts sectors? Uday Kotak tweeted a couple of quarters ago that the Ganesha which we worship on Ganesh Chaturthi in India is actually imported from China. What can be done in order to really take care of the cheap imports which are coming in the furniture area, in the home appliances area? What can be done on that front?
Yeah, so you're referring to basically intermediate and low value products. And, it's important that we identify certain areas. I mean, for instance, we identified active pharmaceutical ingredients. Similarly, we've identified a lot of areas where we need to ensure that we manufacture intermediate products. The supply chain, one thing that this pandemic has taught us is that the supply chain we must become a competitive player in. And if you make yourself very, dependent on external forces, you will face major crisis on a later day. And therefore, the back-end supply chain, if we could do this to ventilators, if we could do this to PPE in a short time, it is possible to do this. And so we've identified a number of intermediate products where India must produce. And there we should go back to this infant industry argument, which Japan and South Korea had adopted, that they had raised duty levels in the initial years. But they brought in a transparent duty structure saying that it will come down within a defined period of 3 to 4 years. And that helped them to make the industry very competitive. Don't provide protection, but lay down a phased manufacturing program by which your duty structure must come down. If we raise it, it should be for a very defined period. Don't if you keep the duty rate on for a very long time, India will not be competitive in global markets, and therefore we must force our manufacturers to become globally competitive, and therefore within a defined period it must be scaled down and brought down to zero levels, and that should be the trajectory, and that will force our companies to become globally competitive.
Okay, now let's understand that what is the message for the entrepreneurs, for someone who say, look, I'm excited, I think we will get a huge impetus if we focus on Atmanirbhar Bharat. What do you think government is likely to give them as a booster shot to increase their business prospects, and how should they lean on government in terms of in support?
No, so my view is that you should not look for government support in terms of subsidies. And that's a bad model to start off with. You should see where there is a competitive advantage for India and whether you can make yourself globally competitive here. And I think all these sectors, many of the sectors that you talked about, India has massive demand. I mean, just look at LED bulbs, look at air conditioning, look at, very low levels of penetration as yet. Look at a whole range of automobiles. The number of car usage in India is still about 21 per thousand as compared to 980 per thousand in USA. Look at completely new areas of growth. Look at electric vehicle manufacturing. Look at a whole range of large-scale demands which will come in consumer goods. All these are areas where India will grow, continue to expand, and that is where we'll be very happy to handhold anyone who wants to come in. We are here to provide all support. We are here to ensure that people who come in may create wealth for themselves and they create wealth for India. But I can assure you that there are people who have invested in India have got long-term results. German, Swedish, Indian investors who invested here actually have across sectors, whether it be pharmaceuticals, whether it be leather, whether it be textile, whether it be food products, they've all, or whether it be automobile, all of them have got good results over a long period of time. Indian demand will continue to grow and expand because we have a very young population. 68 to 70% of our population is below the age of 35, and therefore you will see massive demand coming in the days to come. These are challenging times because of COVID-19, but we should take a long-term perspective of over a 3-decade period, and that will tell you what India's huge competitive advantages in terms of both demand and in terms of skilled manpower. And we are here to provide all support and assistance.
Well, fair point, Mr. Kant. Really appreciate your thoughts. That was Amitabh Kant of Niti Aayog.